So actually we have 5 tables. We have you 4, and then we have the people who are on the internet, on the web. And Leishan has offered to be the reporter backer from them. So I'm going to let you start.
Hello, everybody. Leishan Gargano, and I had the online group today. It was a little bit smaller than our meeting last week. We only had 4 participants, so our group was a bit smaller than all of you at the tables. Our conversation really focused around pre-planning, and so I'll just kind of go through our notes here since you all can't see them. Some of the notes that we had were expressing adaptive management as it relates to the specific plan. So being very specific and avoiding vague language as a means of creating efficiency in a plan, because then participants feel ready to participate more quickly, and then they also are going to be engaged earlier on. With that, there was talk about how they appreciate the opportunity online. Clearly, these people were engaging online and over the phone, but that to ensure that collaboration, that it's not all online, that the face-to-face isn't lost, that the opportunity to build trust in person, and for groups that traditionally have what they consider conflicting interests to really be there together in person, because that gives them the more regular and stronger opportunities to really be collaborative together. And also for planning across landscapes, we discussed expressing planning from that pre-planning stage as an opportunity to have those in the area develop the goals. So for people in planning areas to not start out thinking, oh, I'm being forced into this, but to really think, oh, I'm being given the opportunity to shape this process, and really using kind of that language and that mentality to help engage people and keep them engaged from the beginning. And finally, some of the other points that people brought out, they didn't have big ideas as to how to do this, but it was just the idea of accountability. A lot of people that would be engaged being concerned about funding, being concerned about implementation, and trying to address some of those concerns. They weren't sure how, but really addressing that so that people feel their engagement is going to mean something over the long term. And that's all I have.
Do you have any questions for the people on the phone? I guess Leishan would have to answer for them. Okay. Is there one table that would like to start first? Hello? Brian, are you ready to do that? So let me just... Okay, you have to fight over it. So let me just say it first that we've asked the BLM people to actually be the ones that do the feedback, but I don't want anyone to feel that this is a BLM feedback. The BLMers are reporting back for you guys at the tables, and so everybody should feel that they have an opportunity to speak up, particularly you at the table when Brian reports back, but the rest of you, any questions you have for table number 1 here, you should ask. So with that, where are the extra mics? Okay, thank you.
Testing. Okay, yes, I will report out from our group discussion. I tried to capture everything that folks were talking about, and I will depend upon them to correct me if I have it wrong. So the first, we went through, like everybody else, goal 1, and we talked quite a bit about existing sources of data from the citizen groups is a concern to be able to get that and use that information. There's a concern on how to define landscape priorities through collaboration to ensure that these priorities are actually taken into account for. I think we talked about that earlier in the meeting. It's a good point. Consistent interpretation of landscape goals. I think that was a concern across different management units and how people are interpreting things one way and then the next district interpret it another way. Again, if I have any of this mischaracterized, let me know. I had this spelt, define landscapes in the scale and the stakeholders. And so you want to get to that regional level of defining what your landscape is, the scale you're going to be looking at, and the stakeholders within that. We also want to be looking at successful and unsuccessful models. I think we were talking about transportation plans, specifically SVRAs. I will depend on California to redefine that for me. State vehicle recreation areas. Okay, so there's some models there to look at. We talked about creating a programmatic framework, so it's more of a general plan that then, again, you can effectively tier your more local implementation plans back into and provide that framework for that. Involve interested, over specific issues and whatnot, involve interested stakeholders and subject matter experts to help explain things to folks. And so you can bring in the right people to talk about the right issues, I think. How will we tier these step-down plans into the overall plan, getting back to that programmatic framework, and also how to use an assessment to inform decisions. Is there anything else I missed on that?
So this is all, Brian, this is all under number 1, how to create a more dynamic and efficient planning process.
Correct.
Let's just ask if anybody has any questions about goal 1, so that way we can kind of focus more at that point. Do any of you want to add anything? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Moving over to goal 2. Definitely it's important to look at specific regional demographics in your planning. You want to, this came into a lot of discussions, capturing the input from the rural areas. For instance, I think the Forest Service had an example of putting PC terminals in their offices where public and rural areas can come in and actually log on and provide comments and information. And using the, maybe not the current, but the appropriate technology of web-based technology and pay attention to usable software. We don't want to get into a situation where, well, you can download and interact with these maps, but your PC that you have won't take that kind of software because it's a cutting-edge, high-end software. So we definitely want to have software and web-based technology for the masses in that sense, that people, whether rural or urban, can get to it. I know there is a push to increase broadband capabilities in rural areas throughout the United States right now, so I think that's a good thing. We're also looking at increasing the opportunities of the RACs and DACs. I'm not familiar with that acronym. Okay, thank you. Desert Advisory Council. Okay, the DACs, engagement of the affected areas. Definitely, if your planning area is defined, then you definitely want to be able to have those opportunities to engage everybody. Want to look at partnerships on key issues and initiatives. We want to be able to link the local issues to the broader issues, make sure that the people who have a specific local issue can see that connection to the broader higher level issues that make it make sense to them. We're going to provide opportunities for competing interests to understand one another. I think that's a key basis of collaborative action and collaborative planning. Sounds like it came out of one of my collaborative education trainings I took at one time. Getting people to understand one another. And best practices for collaboration and finding all the tools out there that we can do that. For goal 3, planning across landscapes of multiple scales, there is a concern to incorporate private property interests into landscape level planning. I think that's very important. Concern that landscape level planning boundaries could become too broad to be less meaningful. Does that capture what you were saying? So we want to be very careful about how that's done. Make sure your landscapes and the data are scalable. Examples, good examples of things that have happened here, it looks like in California, are the California Stakeholders Roundtable, the California Pre-Planning Outreach for Watershed Planning, the Sierra Cascade Dialogue, I believe is Forest Service, and getting draft summaries out to people after having meetings so they can see if you've captured what they've been talking about and making sure that their interests have been heard. Anything I missed, folks? I'm sure she's got more detail. Okay, that's the report out from our group.
Is that right? And now, anybody have any questions for this group? And this group have any more comments from themselves? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Would you guys like to be next? Yes? Good. Right.
Am I on? Okay, this group had some fantastic input, so appreciate it very much, and feel free to jump in as I explain this. So, first goal, create a more dynamic and efficient planning process. Some of the input was to set dates and goals that are specific. For example, creating milestones or project completion dates just to help things stay on track and commit to what those deadlines are. Develop plans with change management built in. This would also help us to respond quickly to changing requirements and conditions as those things come up. Review existing processes and regulations to see how to speed those things up. So some of these things like NEPA that are undergirding the planning process, and some efficiencies that could be identified in those. So these next two are also in relation to NEPA, just conducting a broader NEPA analysis up front that would encompass some of those larger areas and changes. Use existing NEPA on the landscape in multiple areas that we already have available. Goal number 2, enhance opportunities for collaborative planning. Help people understand, first of all, what collaborative means and how they can be involved in the process. And along with that is to better educate the public in regards to the planning process and their and their involvement. Improve outreach across field offices and organizations. So for example, someone here had the idea that we can improve our web-based maps and other technologies to where you could input your name and contact information and select a certain area that you would like to be notified when there was a project happening within that area, or potentially even a drop-down menu that would allow you to select certain project types that you'd like to be receiving notification about. And then also that web-based information would also help us to maintain better lists. Open invitation to stakeholders at the beginning of the process, so just better outreach. Improved coordination with other agencies who already have plans and data that are affecting BLM land. For example, counties or state agencies that have their own plans for, say, fish and wildlife would be some examples. Planning goal number 3, stepping on something. Plan across landscapes and at multiple scales. This discussion really centered most around some of the definitions, so actually better defining what we mean by landscape. For example, different landscapes for different issues and planning goals. So that's going to be a dynamic definition depending on what's being managed, what our planning goals are, etc. And then also to clarify expectations of multiple use. In other words, you can't do everything everywhere all the time. Did I summarize those well? Does anybody have clarifications or other input?
Can I can I say one thing? Mm-hmm. For all of you in Denver, one of the longest lasting questions, one of the questions that was asked repeatedly was about the definition of landscape, which the BLM was trying to provide answers that would help people understand. And I wonder if, before we move from that topic, if anybody here had ideas about the definition. I mean, you say, yes, you ought to define landscape, but in terms of definitions that you all think would be helpful, are there any suggestions in the room before we move on?
Sometimes examples work. If you have a watershed and the BLM properties compose a portion of it, and Forest Service properties might compose another portion of it, and then there might be Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or there might be private lands. Designing or planning across a landscape would encompass the watershed, irrespective of those political boundaries. So That's one example in any case, I think.
Good example. Okay. Let's go on.
Okay, and then just some things that these folks have seen that has worked really well. Suggestion that we just be open and listen well and be responsive to the participants. Establishing priorities and directives from the top down, so receiving direction from the Bureau per se helps field offices prioritize some of their workload or planning efforts and be more efficient in that. They're just better able to respond. Having flexible interdisciplinary teams, say a regional interdisciplinary team or someone referred to it as a strike team that would have a specific skill set, and they would go to these different areas to help them with the planning process. Did that capture that? Okay. And the last one was just for the BLM to learn from the U.S. Forest Service on the early adopters for their planning rule and the lessons learned that we can take to heart.
That's a good example. Anybody questions for this group? Or thoughts from the group? Anything more from you all? Okay, thank you very much. Table number 3 in the back corner. David, right? Yeah.
Okay, so we're back here in the corner. So for goal number 1, we had several ideas. One was recognize what uses and expectations and existing dynamics occur on the land at this point. Similar to these folks, there was a comment on don't use jargon or buzzwords. Explain what we mean in clear language. Create an even playing field for all interests. There was concern that that is not happening now. Use a variety of public involvement formats, such as open houses, hearings, World Cafe, and town hall meetings. Also, define triggers for adaptive management. Include a range of activities for the response or action, whether it be something like increased use, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of concerns about Goal 1. One was the ability to represent all stakeholders in the process. And then one was a concern that perhaps an easier RMP amendment process may lead to less stakeholder involvement. That's good there. So over on Goal 2, we have several ideas as well. A specific effort to engage counties, specifically counties, identify stakeholders and communities and do specific outreach to those communities. Back to counties, request a presentation time at a county board of supervisors meeting concerning a cooperating agency status rather than just sending them a letter. Also, goal number 2, create a mechanism to keep the public engaged between the scoping period and the draft EIS period, and encourage public involvement early in the process. Concerned that sometimes once the public finds out something's happening, it's already too far down the road to really affect change. And also make the web use convenient for people. Some examples on goal number 2. Ideas. So actually go to user group meetings rather than just send letters out to user groups. You know, specific use groups, counties, et cetera. Actually go to their meetings and also have meetings for public involvement on different times and different days. Use of neutral facilitators was appreciated by people rather than having BLM folks. And also an idea was also post notes of previous stakeholder meetings on the web so everybody can respond to those and see that. A couple of concerns, there's technology barriers. Technology barriers vary by demographics, such as age or rural folks versus urban folks, and also economic status. And also concern that economic advantage or disadvantage influences the participation in land use planning. And then we got a little bit on goal number 3. We had an idea of having a handbook or a checklist sent to small communities so they can define areas that are important and to define areas of value. Again, on web use, make it convenient for users, and have a way of geographically mapping the comments that are coming from stakeholders to see where those come from within the planning area. We good?
Good. More comments from you all? Thoughts? And on issues, places that you had seen success, were there, I might have missed that.
Yeah, I don't think we really had good examples.
Or didn't have time to
Yeah.
get there, maybe. Yeah. Okay. You need a lot of time for, oh, sorry. Okay, table 4, you're up.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? I think we're on. All right. So we had a really good group here as well. Came up with a lot of really good ideas. Our goals 1 and 2 ended up kind of melding together a little bit. So first off, everyone appreciated the idea of more upfront pre-planning involvement in identifying data needs. This would allow stakeholders to come to the table without a resource issue or an issue in mind, and it would be less contentious and less stressful overall. A structured process focused on a topic or area would be really beneficial for these upfront pre-planning meetings, making sure that when we start off with them, we have an agenda and goals in mind and focus areas rather than just a meeting. Facilitate participation with organizations that have limited resources. A lot of times there are participants that are people that want to get involved, or organizations that might not have the means to be as involved as they would, so they would appreciate more opportunities for involvement. Define and clarify expectations and the purpose at the beginning of the meeting. Set up sideboards. Again, that kind of goes back to the structured process. Education up front and defining terms. Again, I've heard this clarify things. Get rid of the jargon. Make it plain and simple so that people understand. Clarify the context for goals and objectives and just write it out clearly in plain English. And clearly so that people can understand what it is. They appreciated the idea of better public engagement, making sure that everybody has a chance to get involved. And allow people to say or engage in, what does this mean to me and my experience on the public land? Whether I'm a recreationist, I want to go out on, OHV trail, whether I'm from an industry or a rancher, that everybody wants to know, what's in this for me? How do I engage with this process? Better planning outreach for others, federal, state, and local agencies, making sure that all of the federal, state, and local agencies in the planning area are engaged and talking to one another. And better identification of the agency authority among all the participants during pre-planning. Who has the pecking order? Who has the authority for what resources on this piece of landscape? Just to make sure that that's clear up front during the discussion so that you don't get 3/4 of the way through and then realize, uh-oh, we forgot this part. Explain upfront options for counties to engage in the process, in the planning process. There was a statement earlier about opportunities come up. You might get an email or a notification. Maybe you're a newly elected official and you don't have a clue how to engage in this process. So make sure that there's, explain the options up front for what kinds of options each entity has for engaging. Build strong relationships with stakeholders and continue to develop partnerships from the beginning of the planning process all the way through implementation, and make sure that everybody feels like they have ownership in the process. And again, language, include language to encourage communication with communities when we do our outreach. An example that was given was a Redding, California field office engagement for a particular project. For trails? Okay, for recreation activities, that was given as a really good example for communication outreach. Also, streamlining processes like for special recreation permits or things like that that happen frequently in the same place every year on a regular basis, but they have to go through this whole big process every year to redo the same event that happens in the same place. So if this process can be streamlined and do some upfront pre-planning, that maybe it would be easier down the road and less expensive for both the stakeholders and for BLM to accomplish those special recreation events. We also were talking about not forgetting the old ways of communicating, letters, phone calls. Just make it clear, get it out to the public. Not everybody reads the newspaper, not everybody gets on the internet, so we need to be flexible in those. Also, there was a talk about the different pieces or components for Planning 2.0. We have the regulations team, we have the handbook team, and they said, what about adding an us team? A fourth team for stakeholders and the public, and include them as part of the Planning 2.0 team. There was also a discussion about incorporating the public participation process into e-planning and provide outreach so that people understand that that's an option that's there. And thank you for saying that. Getting more into the landscape scales, number 3, plan across landscapes at a multiple scale. The first thing was trails, integrate trails, transportation, and connectivity into landscape planning across the whole landscape, and not just end it at boundaries. When you get on a road or a trail and you travel, it doesn't end at the end of that imaginary border. It keeps going, so we need to be cognizant of that. We also need to commit to step-down planning in the RMP. Make sure that if we are saying that there's going to be OHV planning or travel and transportation planning as a step down, then commit to it in the RMP. We talked about calibrating issues to the environmental landscape scale, and being flexible and allowing different management for varied landscapes, understanding that a landscape includes mountains and valleys and rivers and desert and all kinds of different landscapes within a potential planning area, so be cognizant of that. Also, encourage private-public partnerships and volunteers to achieve goals and objectives. There was a couple of success stories that were talked about where projects were incorporated those and were very successful in it. And it pulled in the stakeholders, and there was a sense of ownership among all of the participants. And then finally, integrating ecological principles into landscape planning and understanding that there are ecological processes that occur across the landscape that need to be considered as well. Did I catch everything?
Great report. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Anything more from the table? So here's a little challenge to y'all. What has anybody heard in this room just now from the 4 tables that is a theme? What themes do you think have come out of that you've heard, some things that you have heard mentioned a couple of times? And could we have the microphones somehow there? Goody. Okay. Hold on just a second. Our guys here will make the microphone work.
Got it.
Yeah.
Check.
Check.
I think we're all concerned that there's universal stakeholder access, especially and I'm not sure where everyone is from, but there's rural areas where that's not so much of an option for them. So
yeah, and
something to be aware of. Yeah.
Here we are out in the West where everybody might not have computer terminals, and so having computer terminals at the BLM offices was, I think, suggested by your group, as well as some other ideas. Okay, thanks. What other themes came up that you heard, that came out? Anything else? Yeah, okay. Why don't you take my mic?
John Stewart with California Association of Four-Wheel Drive Clubs. Couple of things I keep hearing out here is the concept of what is a landscape and being able to put something around it that's meaningful, whether you scale it up, scale it down, top down, bottom up type bit. It's putting that phrase and that into something that people can really understand and get their arms around and mind around to figure out what's going on.
The communication, effectively communicating what your goals are, and then making sure that the people that you're asking for input understand what you're asking. No jargon. Making sure that you have enough people at the table, looking at your demographics, and those are the things I think almost everybody has talked about.
Not to mention the right people at the table. Enough people and people from all the stakeholder groups. Themes? Anybody else? And from BLM, any thoughts about the themes that you've heard? In any case, we're going to talk about next steps here, and that may be, I don't know if that's part of what you want to say, but you're up, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
Should I go into the next steps now?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Well, I just want to again thank everyone for taking the time to spend several hours here discussing this. I heard a lot of really great feedback, both from the table I sat in on as well as the report outs from this. So thank you truly for coming and participating in this. In terms of next steps moving forward, we are going to have a summary of both the Denver meeting as well as this meeting with all this information captured in it. And we are going to post that to our Planning 2.0 website. I believe we are going to have it up there sometime, what did we say? Early November, late October. We hope to have it posted. Along those lines, we do have an email contact list that we're putting together for this initiative. Some of you may already be on it. If you're not on it, if you did give us your email and you wrote legibly, that's an important feature, we will add you onto it. If you are on the web and you didn't sign in, you can get online from our Planning 2.0 website. And right now we have the pre-registration form, so you can go in there, don't actually register for the meetings, but just give us your email address and say you want to be added. And sometime in the next week, we'll update that. So it's just a way to get on the email list. As this project moves forward, we will send notifications to that list, whether it be announcing that the report is on the website or announcing future opportunities to participate. We'll be using that email list. I also just wanted to remind people, if you leave today and you get your best idea yet and you're going, oh, why didn't I think to say that? You can still share that with us. We have a comment email address that is on our website. I believe it's BLM_WO_plan2@blm.gov. So send us your ideas and your input to that website. We don't have a formal end of when we're going to take input, but I encourage you to get it in there sooner so we can make sure to consider it the most fully. Ideally, we'd like to get input, by the end of October so we can move forward into the next phase of this process. And then finally, looking forward, when the rule comes out, the proposed rule, that we're expecting that to be sometime in the spring, there will be a formal public comment period on that rule. And we will let everyone know when that's available and when that starts through the contact list. So that'll be a future opportunity to provide detailed feedback.
So does anybody have any questions for BLM about next steps, how to keep in touch, how to know what's going on, anything like that? Okay, so as promised, this is a 2-minute meeting evaluation. So you'll see up here, I have one thing that says plus and the other is delta, which is what did you like about the meeting today? What would you suggest be done differently? What do you want them to do more of? What would you like to see differently or less of? So hands up. Is there anything you liked about the meeting today? Yes.
The facilitation was excellent.
Okay, thanks. Okay. What else? Anything that you liked or would like to see more of? or like to see differently?
I think these smaller breakout sessions are pretty helpful. People are more comfortable adding to the conversation, and I think we get a lot out of it.
So you thought people feel more comfortable in these small groups?
Yeah, you can challenge each other's ideas and also, help others develop ideas. So yeah, I think it's really helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any comments about having about having BLM doing the writing? We didn't do that in Denver, and there was a problem because the people who were facilitators like ourselves didn't always get the nuances that the facilitators like these guys did. I mean, the recorders and the writers like these guys did. And we didn't have BLM at every table sitting down as we did here. And there was a suggestion that people would like to have that. Do you have any comments about how that worked for you all at your tables? First and then second.
Actually, I found it really helpful to have the BLM staff at the table because they were able to explain from a personal standpoint what the reality is of a concept or what they were already doing. And also definitions were more readily available.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought it was really good.
Good. Okay, thank you. And the table over here? Person over here?
Yeah, John Stewart again. And now the thing of having the two people at the table, whether it be BLM plus a facilitator, it's not so much the critical from that respect, but the fact that there are two different people, one to lead the discussion and one to capture the notes on the flip chart, which a single person doing that is it's hard. Very stressful.
It's really hard. I mean, it's like right now I'm kind of got my back to you, so you're right. Thank you, John. Okay, anything on this side that you'd like to see more of or add if we were doing this again? Well, with that, thank you all. Another hour. Yeah, so let this go on longer, the small groups. Would you have wanted the small groups to go on longer? How many thought it should go on longer? How many thought it was about right in terms of time? Okay. Okay, thanks.
Just one short last comment. I think it's helpful that when we do stakeholder meetings, we capture the notes and share them at the beginning of the next meeting. Not necessarily you have to go through them all, but they're there. I think it helps people become fostered into the process and really adapt it. And then it gives people, new information.
So at the beginning of each meeting, have the notes from the last meeting.
Available is good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, yes, one more here. Let's have a mic.
I'll just make a recommendation. As you acquire email addresses, one of the things that has worked really well in the DRECP process, there is a listserv. So when comments or notes are made available, they are sent to the entire listserv. It's a real-time sort of way of getting information to interested stakeholders for which they can choose or choose not to read them, but then that information is available immediately.
Okay.
And I think it's worked well.
Okay, great. Going. You're all gone. Thank you so much. Really appreciated your being here.